builder by profession, carpenter by trade, been in the industry for 25 years now, producing estimates and tenders. And I'd like to talk to you guys today about what you're actually worth and then how to fit your worth into the project cost to make sure you cover all your overheads and obviously you get some profit out of it as well. That's why we're here. So is there any carpenters in the room? Yeah, carpenters, mate. What are you guys charging out at as a carpenter here in Queensland?
It varies a lot, but the basic hourly rate, 68 an hour. 68,
okay. Any bricklayers in the room? What are bricklayers usually charging out hourly rates?
Hourly rates, no, I charge by bricks.
Okay. How many bricks can you lay in a day?
About 700.
700, so 700, so what are you charging an hour? Oh, sorry, what are you charging a brick?
Charging a brick, 80 cents a brick.
8 cents?
80.
80 cents. Let's say $1, $700.
$1, yeah.
Divide 700 by 7, so you charge about $100 an hour.
Yeah.
Do you reckon you'll get that? If you come up to me as a builder, do you reckon you'll be able to get $100 an hour?
No, most builders tell me what I'm getting paid.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I do that for private jobs.
Yep. So but generally as a bricklayer, you can probably command about what, say $45 an hour if you did it on an hourly rate? 45 to 50? Yeah. Yep. Any other trades? Is there any other? Yeah? You're a plumber. Mate, what do you guys charge at it?
We charge somewhere between $70 to $80 an hour.
$70, $80 an hour. Now the reason I ask you guys that question is you can see there's quite a big difference between what plumbers, bricklayers, carpenters might charge, or whether you're working up the coast or down the coast. So it also depends where you are. But if I've just come into town and I said to you guys, I want you to come and work for me, what do you reckon would be a really good daily rate to take home every day, cash in hand? Come on, what do you reckon? What would you like? 500 bucks. Yeah? $500 a day. And a carton. That was the bricklayer. $500 a day, you turn up to work at 7 o'clock, you'll give you 15 minutes morning tea, an hour for lunch, or half an hour for lunch, you can go home at 3:30. Everyone happy with that?
No, we're 650.
650? You want 650? Okay. No arguments, yeah? Do you reckon you could walk out to the market today and get 650 every day?
No.
Probably not. Okay, so what do you reckon you could walk out to the market and get every day?
250.
About 250. So there's a massive price difference between what you want, what you think you're worth, and what you can actually get, yeah? So what about I sort of take an average, and we'll go for 500 bucks a day, all right? So I'll give you $500 a day. I'm going to times that by 5 days a week. It's $2,500, yep? You're going to work 48 weeks a year. I'll give you 4 weeks holiday. Yeah, what's that? That's 96,000, is that correct? About $96,000? I think that's about right, a year. Would you be happy with that? Cash, 5 days a week?
Yeah.
Everyone fairly happy? Yeah, I'd be happy with that. So what have I got to take out of that before I can actually hand it over to my wife or my girlfriend or both of them? Tax. Well, actually, I've been in the industry for 25 years. I probably don't pay that much because I can reduce my tax. So how do I reduce the tax on that? What do I take off it? Overheads, correct. So I'm going to talk about some overheads. Now up on the screen you can see that I've listed some overheads. I've listed things like the accountant, advertising, all risk insurance, because as a sole contractor I can't get workers' comp unless I'm employed by my company. It's a different sort of setup. But as a sole trader I'd get personal sickness and accident. Car insurance, your lease, your rego, your petrol, all that sort of stuff I've added in there. What's one thing I haven't put in there, what most people forget when they're adding up their overheads?
Insurance.
No, insurance is up there. But insurance on particular jobs, I would directly contribute to the job. So these are all the things you cannot directly contribute to a job.
Wages?
No, not wages, haven't worked yet.
Food?
Phone, yeah, phone's up there. No food.
Mortgage
Right.
on the house?
No, that's in my personal one. All right, so I've got two. I've got one for my business and one for my personal. Yeah, your vehicle, your mobile, your phone, fax at home, any stationery. Anyway, I've added them all up. But there's two things that people forget as an overhead. One of them is holidays. Do you consider that as holiday? Do you consider that an overhead?
Yeah.
You have to, because why? You're only working 48 weeks a year. So for 4 weeks a year, you've got to pay for your holidays. I've got 4 kids. It cost me at least $6,000 for a 4-week holiday. And that's if I stay in a caravan park at Currumbin. Yeah? So what's other things? So now I've sort of worked out what I need as an overhead while I'm actually currently working. What should I add as an overhead when I finish work? What do I need when I finish work? superannuation. A lot of guys forget about it. If you're earning $96,000 a year, you should be at least putting 10% away, whether that's in shares or in property or whatever it might be some sort of super later on in life. So I'm going to add on another 9,600 to this list up here.
The builder pays super.
If you're employed, but we're just talking about as a subcontractor on an hourly rate. So the answer to your question is we're self-employed today, so the builder isn't going to be paying for it. 9600, enter. Okay, so if you look at all the overheads I've got up on the board there, it comes to $47,114. And that's for things like my clothes at $500 a year, spending $100 a month on your mobile phone, $40 on a phone fax, stationery, $30 a month, you know, stamps, letters, things like that. So I don't have a lot of overheads that I've missed out of there. So it's going to cost you, well, let's just say it's our business now, $47,144. $47,144. So we'll have, actually, can someone get their calculator out and just deduct the 96,000 from the 4744? Because what I'm going to work out for you guys is actually how much you're earning an hour. You guys told me that you wanted $500 a day, which sounds really good, yeah? And you're charging out at this 68, between 45 and 55 and 70 and 80. But actually what you end up left with at the end of the day after you've got your $96,000 cash and your 47,144 overheads, the difference is?
48,856.
Right, you're left with 48,856, don't lose that thought. Because how many days a week do you actually work as a sole trader? 5 days a week. All right, so how many weeks a year do you reckon you work as a sole trader? Have you taken 4 weeks holiday lately? No, how many holidays do you reckon you get? Maybe 2? Okay, so Mr. Bricklayer over there, can you divide that 48,856 by 50 weeks? What do I end up with?
$977.
$977. Now divide that by, how many hours a week do you reckon you work? Do you work 36 hours a week? I'll give you the typical contractor. Gets up in the morning at about 6 o'clock, makes a cup of tea, watches the girls on Channel 10 for a little while, fights the traffic. I'm from Sydney, so I fight the traffic to get to the hardware store, pick up all the stuff that I need, have a bit of a chat. I'm on the job by about 7:30, unpack all my gear, obviously check my OH&S stuff, have a chat to the client. I'm starting work by 8 o'clock. Let's say I'm hanging a door. I start hanging a door and then I work out that I've got the wrong hinges. So I race off back down the hardware store, get some hinges, swap them over, maybe buy something to eat, come back to the job, figure around for a little while, realise I've got to go do a quotation. I run off and do a quote, come back, finish off what I've got to do, hopefully, throw all the tools in the back of the car, don't pack them up properly, race back home in peak hour traffic. If I'm lucky, there's food on the table, I get to throw the kids up in the air for a little while. And what are you doing at about 6, 7 o'clock at night? You're working on the quote that you went and looked at during the day, and then you're invoicing the people that you did the work for that day. Generally, that's how it works. You're putting in 12 to 16 hour days. So now I'm going to ask you again, how many hours a week do you reckon you work?
60.
About 60, at least 60 to 75. So let's say divide that 977 by 65 hours. What have you got?
15.
$15 an hour. 15 bucks. What do you reckon the person down the tavern there earns pulling beers behind the bar? About $15 to $18 an hour. Do they have a risk of injuring themselves at work? Probably very minimal. Do they risk losing their house because they put it up as surety to do work? Probably not. In fact, definitely not. So you guys that wanted to get $500 a day, really when you break it down, works out about 15 bucks an hour. So you were right. $650 is probably the go, but it's hard to get that amount of per hour. Personally, don't work on an hourly rate. So that's why we've got to quote jobs and put in a margin that's going to give us a better income, correct? So now what we'll talk about is what we're going to include on an estimate. So now that I've hopefully shown you guys, look, it doesn't matter really how much you take home a day, you can't earn enough money with your own hands. I'll give you an example. My brother-in-law, who's an auditor for the tax department, so he's a really exciting bloke, had someone come and fit a shower screen at his place. And he said to me, Paul, he said, this bloke came with a caulking gun, a drill, a level and a pencil, had a brand new truck and really nice clothes on. He was in my house for $15, I paid him 80 bucks. I said to him, how many of these jobs do you reckon you do a day? He goes, oh, between 10 and 15. You work it out. 10 and 15 at $80 a pop, He's got 4 tools. He's got hardly any of the overheads we talked about as builders. He's making a fortune. Now, it would be a pretty boring job, but you think about how to reduce your overheads. You obviously don't want to reduce holidays because that's quality of life while you're working. You don't want to reduce your super because that's quality of life when you finish work, and bricklayers always got a bad back when they finish. So you want to be able to reduce the overheads that you can reduce. Do certain jobs in certain areas so you can cut down on your petrol and your travel costs. Do particular projects like only bathroom renovations to cut down on the type of tools that you've got to have. You know, maybe cut down on where you store your materials or form partnerships to reduce costs or share costs. So that's ways of reducing your overheads. But now I want to show you how to fit them into the project. So how do you fit a project, overheads into a project? When we estimate a project, we add in our materials, our labour, and most guys, and I know because I used to do it, we add on 20% for profit and overheads. I worked it out a long time ago. If you add on 20% profit and overheads on top of your materials and labour, you make between 4 and 6% profit if you don't stuff up. And how many times don't we stuff up or have to go back to do some defects? All the time. So the things that people forget in here is the first one, which you guys have mentioned, is your overheads, which we know, because this chart that I've shown you has broken down our overhead costs into, and I'll just bring that up, into weeks. So it's $906 a week, $181 a day, or $22 an hour for my business. So let's just say this job here, we had $10,000 in materials, and we had $10,000 in labour, and let's say the job goes for 12 weeks. So my overheads would be 12 weeks times $906 a week. Let's say we round it off, let's just say it's $12,000. There's my overheads covered. So what have I now covered? I've covered what I'm going to pay for my materials, what I'm going to pay my guys to do the work or my subcontractors, and I've covered my business. What's one thing I've left out that I haven't covered quite yet? No, that's in the overheads. What's the most important thing in your business? Well, the most person. Yeah, you. So I haven't covered myself yet. So here's my site, I call that site supervision. You know, and site supervision usually is over the 12-week period, 5 days a week, 2 hours a day, you know, meeting the client, doing the quotes, and then you times that by your chosen hourly rate. And your hourly rate might be $50 an hour, for example. And you can work that out using the other spreadsheet that I've got there. So if you times that by 50, so what's that? That's 100, that's 500, 500 times 12, $6,000. So now, what have you done? You've covered everything on that job. You've covered your materials, your labour, your supervision, and your overheads. The only thing that's negotiable on the job is the profit. And if they're a school teacher, a lawyer, or someone in the legal industry, you obviously would charge a much higher profit. Yeah? If there's someone really nice, someone you've known before, you may be charged lesser profit. And the going rate's anywhere from 10 to about 25%. And that's the only thing you can negotiate. So once you put in your quotation, if they want to argue any points or reduce the cost, the only way to reduce the cost is how? Take it out of your profit or cut things off. And one of the tricks I do is I remove things from the quote or from the estimate, but I don't change my profit margin. It stays the same. And so, oh, you don't want that bathroom. Well, you can save $10,000, but all my overheads and my profit will remain on the job. Okay, that's a really important point because you've actually done all the work, you're not going to get paid for it. And just to take something off still means you'll be doing the same amount of site supervision and the job will prolong still for the same amount of time that you've estimated. So it's very important to remember that. So, yes?
You're talking there from as a builder with a site supervisor.
Yeah.
As a bricklayer, my income is in my labour. Should I be allowing that an amount in there for my time for when I go out and do quotes?
That's exactly
outside
right.
of my labour.
That's right. Yeah, because the labour that I've mentioned here can be directly attributed to the project. So you're charging out that $10,000 for your work. The site supervision is you then maybe getting there a bit early, setting it up, meeting the client, walking through with them, you know, going through, doing the invoices at the end of the job. You can't attribute that to the work that's been provided. And the way that we like to work it out as builders is that every job has to be subcontracted. As soon as I jump in the trench and start digging, I actually lose money. Or you can look at it another way. If I jump in and start laying bricks with you, I definitely lose money because I'm a carpenter. But if you were the bricklayer and you were able to put a couple of hours in, well, you're going to make money by doing that little bit. But I wouldn't be working on the job the whole day, because as a builder, it's the next level up. You'll be doing the supervision, and you should have at least 3 jobs going, between 3 and 5 jobs. So you'll be going around to each job. So your 2 hours will be spent on each of those jobs, supervising the work and then doing the quotations afterwards. It's really important to remember that your wages don't come out of here. Your wages come out of here, site supervision. Very important. So make sure you allow for them in your project. And remember, they can't be adjusted. They're a fixed price. That can only be the adjustment. So then, yes.
As a builder, overseeing, we've stepped up from the gang of carpenters or gang of bricklayers, and we've stepped up to be a principal contractor, and I'm overseeing these number of jobs, like you've said. Should we be allowing, you know, what if we said, well, look, we'll take a weekly wage of $2,000 a week. Supervision cost, it goes to the company, and then another column saying, right, allowance for the builder's wage, $2,000 a week on top of that?
Well, if it's a builder's wage,
yes,
right, it would be within the site supervision, or it could be within your overhead costs.
Right.
So you might decide that, well, look, I've got a constant overhead cost to, say, a supervisor of $100,000 a year. So you would build that into your cost. But what you would have to do, let's say you were doing 3 jobs. You would divide that figure by 3. So at the moment we're only doing 1 job. But if you had 3 jobs on the run, you divide that figure by 3, the 906. So each job pays $300 a week. And if you've got a supervisor cost in, obviously that would bring it up. But it will reduce the overhead cost per job. But for the moment, we got 1 job, and our overheads are going to cost us $906 a week. So the only way to reduce that is to have more projects, but no more than about 3 or 5, because then you can't supervise it properly unless you've got a business partner or someone else out there supervising.
So to break that down again, what you've been saying, on a smaller building business,
yep.
a family builder,
yep.
The wife or partner may be doing the administration, so she draws a wage, you draw a wage. That's included in that regular overhead calculation.
Because it can't be directly attributed to, say, hanging a door or laying a wall or putting in some pipes. That's correct.
Do you feel that that's been an issue where a lot of early or young building business owners have missed out on?
Oh, most definitely. And that's why I always say, allow all your labour costs as if you're going to subcontract it out. But if they have their wife or their girlfriend or their business partner doing work in the office and they don't allow for it, it's an overhead that they should have in the overhead part. That's correct. And in that spreadsheet which I've supplied, you can add lines in there and it'll calculate it all for you. Exactly right. So now I'll move on is how do you then put it into your, we've worked out the overheads, but how do we apply it into the job, into the estimate? So we've shown you how we apply the overheads into that estimate, and now move into progress payments. So I'll just flip this one over. So with the progress payments now in the project, in New South Wales, for example, there's only 1 progress payment that you can claim legally, or that's legally binding, and that's the deposit. Now the deposit, you can have a deposit of 5% for jobs over 20,000, and you can claim 10% for jobs under 20,000. Outside of that, you claim whatever you like, as long as you don't claim more than what the value of the work that you've done. However, what I like to do is I like to add in my overheads at least into the first 3 progress payments. So if I've worked out on that job that my overheads were $12,000 on that job, for example, I would want to divide that into the first 3 progress payments. It helps you with your cash flow. And what's another thing that helps you with the cash flow?
Getting the job done on time.
Getting it done on time, definitely. Quicker the better. Yeah, good debt collection. And if I rephrase that is, the quicker you get the progress payments, the better off you're going to be. And I'll explain to you why. There's a thing called a money wheel. What happens at this point in our money wheel? This is the job, yeah? So what do you do with money at the beginning of the job? No, before that, well, you buy stuff for the job, yeah? So money's going out at this point. What happens after you pay for materials and you get a subcontractor to do work? What do you do next? Well, they say you do the work, right? Then what do you do after you've done the work? So at this point here, you invoice. Then what happens? The quicker you get paid, the better off you are. So you get paid at this point. So what happens at this point when you get paid? Money comes, money's coming in. Just before you spend money again and reinvest it in the business, what do? So as money's coming in, money comes in, what do? You take out your little bit. So out comes Paul's percentage. Comes out my little percent, pays my wages, pays my subbies, all those people. And then the rest of it goes back into the business. Now what happens if I turn this wheel? As I turn the wheel, what's happening? Money's coming out. What happens if the wheel stops? So if I said to you, hit my hand, and every time you hit my hand, I'm going to give you $5, what are you going to do? Mate, you'd be going like this, yeah? So the idea is to turn the money wheel as quickly as you can. Turn the money wheel as quickly as you can to get your share out. Do the work properly, invoice, get paid within 5 days. Yeah, not within 14, not within a 30-day period, within 5 days. You've done the work, pay. If there's no visible defects, under contract law, you can be paid. So get your money as quickly as you can. So if I revert that back to my pie chart for progress payments, what do you want to do? You want to get as many progress payments as you can. And the job we talked about before went for 12 weeks, yeah? On some jobs where people have finance, they have 4 progress payments. Again, one of my rules is I don't do work for people that get money from the bank, because the bank says, no, we'll give you 4 progress payments, that's it. What's happening to my money wheel with 4 progress payments? It's going, well, the first part goes quick, and then it seems to skip and go here, and it skip and go here, and I don't get paid. But everyone else is asking for money. So you always ask your client for a line of credit or make sure they've got the money. It's in the contract law, you can make sure they've got it. But imagine if this was 4 pieces of pizza. And I told you I had 4 kids, yeah? Ethan, Renee, Ben and Jade. The missus has already taken her part out. Yeah, that was the legal part. What happens if I take Ethan and Renee, Ben and Jade with a piece of pizza cut into 4 down to the beach? And Ethan drops his bit of pizza in the sand. What happens to it? You throw it out. Now think of that as a progress payment. Because I tell you now, Renee isn't going to give Ethan her bit of pizza because he's been giving her uppercuts all day. So if that progress payment has gone out the window because the windows are not going to be delivered, and that is a, how big did we say that job was? 12-week job, and I've got to wait 4 weeks for my next progress payment. 4 weeks, the money will stopped. How are you going to pay people? So the idea is to split up your payments into as many parts as you can. Personally, I like weekly payments. Any job that goes for more than about 8 weeks, get a weekly payment. It's really simple. It's much easier for someone to hand over a $5,000 cheque or a $2,000 cheque than a $25,000 cheque. You know, even I stutter when I talk about those figures, yeah? So break down your progress payments as quickly as you can and turn the money wheel as quickly as you can. That's the whole idea. Okay, so just to recap on that, work out what you're worth. Get that spreadsheet, fill in all the details. It's available through TN Constructions, yeah? And it'll actually calculate it all for you. It'll calculate what your hourly one. There's 2 spreadsheets. There's a business one and there's a personal one. So you work out your business overheads, which is easy to do. Most people use a MYOB or you do your BAS each month, so you should know what all your monthly payments is. What I do is I get my credit card. Everything's on the credit card. I've actually got a program where I highlight all my credit card details, stick it into the Excel sheet, and it puts it into how much I spend each month. And it gives me a budget. It's fantastic. If you want to go for a loan, you can use this. Do the same with my personal one. We put in how much we spend on food, how much we spend on our mortgage payments, and it calculates personal. So then I can add in my site supervision as me personally and my overheads as my business. There's 2 spreadsheets for you. Put into the quote, only negotiate on your overhead costs or on your profit. Don't be scared to charge, all right? And make sure you allow for everything and have regular progress payments. Any other questions there?
Well, on a national On a national basis, when you're looking at your multiple progress claims, in many states they have two payment methods in the contract. So once you put together your quote or you do your estimate, what you're saying is that you would then go across to the type of contract that you're using, and if you can use not the predetermined 4 or 5 percentages, but for the sake of method A was predetermined, and then go to method B and then use method B to break down from the quotation you've put together into a series of more manageable payment options for the client.
What I do is if I come across a contract with I'm unfamiliar with, I don't use it. I use the contracts that I am familiar with. Master builder contracts I know are very good. They've got 10 to 11 progress payments already in there. Otherwise, I attach a separate sheet within the contract that both parties sign and they agree to. This is the progress payment schedule. And as long as it doesn't affect any other part of the contract, that's the way you do it. You attach your quotation in there and your progress payment schedule. That's correct. There was a question earlier on.
Paul, during that you were talking about, 1 minute you were talking estimate, then you were talking quote, and I got to tell you, I'm looking at doing a tender. What's the difference between all that?
Look, some people believe that a quote and a tender are the same thing. However, you could break it down further. You can say that an estimate is part of your quotation. So you do your estimate first, you do your bill of quantities, which was talked about earlier, do your bill of quantities, do your takeoff. That forms then your estimate, right? You put your estimate in with your quotation, which is the formal letter to the client. It says, look, this is the job that I'm going to do, this is how much I'm going to do it for, this is how long it's going to take, and these are all the items that I've included, these are all the items that I've excluded. And then you put that in a package with maybe some other information about the company, and that forms your tender package. So if someone says, what's the difference between a tender, a quote, and an estimate? Estimate forms part of your quote forms part of your tender with other documents, which will be the contract, maybe a business profile, maybe a profile about your subcontractors, things like that. Does that make sense?
So when I'm doing a quote, how much information do I give the customer on the quote?
Yep.
I've been in the process of, when I do a quote, I'll tell them everything. That, you know, this is how much the labour's going to be, and this is how much I'm going to pay for the sand, and this is how much I'm going to pay for the coloured mortar and all that. There are blokes out there that say I'm crazy for doing that. What's your opinion on it?
My opinion is I like to give a list of inclusions, but I will not go down the track as saying I'm going to pay my carpenter this much and I'm going to pay my plumber this much for your job. Within the contract, I'll say if you do any variations, the plumber will charge this much per day or per hour, or the carpenter pays this much, but I prefer to quote everything. The reason I prefer to quote everything is because, like the other guy was saying before, the quicker I do it, the better off I'll be. I can put on my percentage. So I break down the job as far as everything I will do on the job, and I also detail everything I won't do on the job, but I will not break down the job into smaller and smaller categories about how much sand, how much I'm going to spend on sand, because then you get into a fight with the client as, oh, they can go to so-and-so supplier and get something different, and it turns into a mess. Sometimes I don't even break down my trades. It depends on the client. I don't like to break down my trades because then they turn around and go, oh, but my brother-in-law's an electrician, can he do the electrical work? And as soon as that starts, I tend to want to walk away from the job. I don't want to do the job, unless obviously I know them, because what you have to do in that situation, you've got to stop the job, you've got to leave, let them do their work, and then you've got to reinstate the job again. Otherwise, you become responsible for the OH&S and anything that might happen on that project. So I'd rather not deal with things like that. And so to get back to your question, I break down the job as far as these are the things I'm going to do, not going to do, and this is how much I'm going to charge you. And if you want to break the job down further, you can remove things or make the job less. You can remove things, or I can adjust my profit margin, but that's all I'm going to do.
So in the realms of estimating, the message you're telling us here is we put together a full and detailed estimate, but that estimate remains in the office. It doesn't go outside, does it?
That's correct. The wording you can show the client the wording. I've often done that, but I won't show them my calculations, if that makes sense.
And Paul, where do I put the GST?
That's a very good question. GST always goes last.
So I can claim GST on my profit?
That's correct. Yeah, well, your profit is just a percentage that you're allowing on a job. All right. So what we're saying is we're charging the client, well, we're really tax collectors for the government, so we're charging 10% on top of that amount of money, which just happens to be called my profit. But be careful, there's another trick to adding on a percentage. I'll give you an example. What's 100 times 20%? What's 20% on top of 100? So if a job costs $100, I'm adding on 20% profit.
20 bucks.
20 bucks, so it's $120, yeah? Now, what if the client says to me, oh, look, I want a discount on that. Can you take $100 off? And me, silly, when I was young, used to say, yeah, I'll take off my percentage too. What's 20% of 120? 24, yeah? So if I deduct $24, what am I left with? I'm left with $96. Hold on a minute, I started with 100. Where did the $4 go? Because what I didn't do, I didn't add on the 20% of my 20%. So what I would have had to do is times that by 1.25. That will give me $125, right? 20% of 125 is 25, and it gives me back my true 100. So be careful when you're adding on percentages or taking off a percentage. But all the ways with the GST, it goes last. Yep.
Paul, I'm doing the builder course through T and Constructions, and I struggle with the GST bit on this prime cost and provisional sum. Mm-hmm. So if I'm doing a quote for a customer and I allow a PC for the tiles, do I put GST on that PC, or is it just the cost of the square metre of the tile? Just the tiles. I can't work out where to put the GST.
The answer to your question is yes, you add on GST, but you must be careful because you've been charged GST by the tile supplier. So you're not allowed to double dip. So there's that in and out method with the GST, input and output credit. So with your accountant will help you work that out, but the cost of the tiles is, say, $200 plus GST. So you've paid $220. So you've paid $220, that'll go to output credit as far as you've paid the $200, the $20 GST. Then you put on your GST, put your percentage on top, plus your GST, and then that would be an inward credit, and they would then balance them out. So the answer to your question is you always add on the GST, but you must make note that you've paid GST and then you've collected it.
Okay, you just said something there that... Where do I put my profit?
Yeah, but I said to you, after you got your cost of the tiles, which is 220 plus including GST, add on your profit, and then you add on your GST. It's always last. Okay,
so I've now given my customer, let's say the tiles are $100 a square metre. I've given my customer $125 because I've put my bid on top. What happens if they go and choose a tile that's worth $125? They're taking my...
Oh, I see. As far as how do you differentiate the PC item? Well, if you've made an allowance of $100 for tiles as a PC, if they choose a tile worth $25, it would just go as a variation of $25 a square metre, because you've obviously included the $100 in your original price and it's listed as a prime cost item. So the $25 difference is what you would add on your profit and overheads too, all right? Or you add on your profit too, the overheads not so much, and then you would add on your GST. But sorry, the GST only for your part. So if they've already paid GST, you've got to give them the $25 is the net rate, not plus the contractor's GST.
So when I'm doing my quote, or estimate, I tell the customer $100.
Yes.
But I include that $100 in my full
list.
Full list, and then I put the profit on. So I'm actually making profit on that $100. Correct. In the full list of the estimate.
Yep. And then if they choose tiles worth $90, you might give them a $10 discount for the amount of square metres, but I don't adjust my profit. I spoke about that earlier. I leave my profit margin the way it is, because if I did deduct my profit, I end up losing $4 out of every 100. So I don't adjust my profit.
And you just give that back to them at the end of the job as a variation.
At the end of the job as a variation. You could include it in the next progress payment. It just depends on your relationship with the client, and sometimes it's easier to do that, just to keep track, but also make sure you're claiming your variations as you go along as well. And the other thing I make sure you do is, when you invoice for a progress payment, make sure you give them a separate invoice for any variations. Never include your variation invoices with your standard invoices for progress payments. You can give them at the same time, but make sure they're two completely separate invoices. Because within the contracts, you want to be able to go through the contract and then the job and tick off each progress payment, and then the variations always keep separately. Otherwise, you can get some confusion, especially if you've got a variation which is the same price as a progress payment. They can then say, oh, but I've already paid you that. Okay, so keep them always separate. It's a very important detail.
So under due diligence, what you would do is you would then record that variation back into your original estimate, so that you've got an accurate record of where the monies go when you're doing a proposed versus actual at the end of the job.
Yeah, I like to give them a statement each month to say, this is how much the job cost originally, these are the progress payments you've paid so far and the variations, this is the amount owing. Yeah, so then they know where they are each month, how the job's being progressed. It's called a monthly statement.
So, Paul, as far as getting 2 or 3 months into a job and having, say, 2 or 3 variations, you're into your 3rd, 4th claim, where do you slide your variations into that claim? Do you...
I keep it separate.
Yeah, yes, they're separate, but to claim them...
Straight away.
Straight away.
And with a variation, there's nothing wrong with getting the variation amount up front. It's got nothing to do with the contract, as far as there's no legal determination of what you can claim. So, for example, I was on a job only this week and they wanted to put a set of stairs out the back. I said, it's worth $3,000, pay up front. Simple. Here's your $3,000, we build the stairs. So you can do that. Yeah, there's no rule on how much you can claim for a variation.
So you're best to write that into your contract at the start of the job.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, guys, is there any other questions for the moment? All right, well, thanks very much.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Paul. That was excellent. As you can see, there's quite a methodical approach to the discipline of estimating. John has provided an overview on all the processes to put together a price for a job. Paul has approached the discipline of estimating to include all the costs that can't be directly associated with a project, but must be associated within the business structure and the process of methodical and accurate estimating. I hope you've enjoyed the presentation. I hope you're able to take what we've presented today home with you and add to the ongoing success of your building business. Thank you.